Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters. Welcome to Uplift Dawah stream. Today I have one of my brothers with me, alhamdulillah, brother Subboor Ahmed. He really needs no introduction. I know a lot of you already know him, alhamdulillah. May Allah bless him and all of the amazing work that he is doing. Today we're going to go over evolution, inshallah, binillahi kareem. And he's going to break it all down for us. As someone who has been dealing with this, who has debated atheists, who use evolution as a way to replace God. And so this is going to be an interesting topic, inshallah. Join us. If you have some questions, please make sure you go ahead and ask those questions, and I'll try to go ahead and get him to answer it. Otherwise, we'll just get started and pass it on to him, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for being here, Habibi.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure, and Jazakallah khair for all of the great work that, mashallah, Uplift Dawah has been doing over the years. If I recall correctly, I remember seeing the pictures back as far as 2016. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Is that when you started?
December 2015, alhamdulillah.
Yeah. Okay. That's, mashallah, it's quite good, because I remember I started seeing pictures of you guys, and you have, mashallah, some bright blue hoodies and stuff. Seattle, right?
That's right. That's right.
Mashallah. It's great stuff. It's great stuff. I mean, it comes up on my feed a lot. The uplift Dawah stuff, and
we're trying to do it by learning from you guys, alhamdulillah. You guys have been doing it for a long time, mashallah. And,
not as long as you would predict. Actually, some of the Dawah stuff in the UK that's quite active. It's actually been consistently going on since the 80s, right? Before I was born. So I think it's through social media that our stuff, your stuff, all that stuff comes to the forefront. But the Dawah, in terms of the grassroots stuff, which is why one of the reasons I love the stuff you guys do, is because it's not sitting in an ivory tower. You're like on the ground talking to people, and that's
right.
The thing. So obviously that's related to when you're speaking to people nowadays, and you're speaking a lot about God. The obvious topic comes up. Well, hasn't evolution gotten rid of the idea of God? Doesn't science do away with God? What do we need God for? Blah, blah, blah. So I think, I definitely like to start off the conversation with, a story, because I think stories are very important for people to understand, the entire picture. So a few years ago, this is back before we had internet on our smartphones, right? So this is the time when you had to go to an internet cafe to use the internet, or you went home. So if you were outside and you needed to contact someone via email, you'd go into an internet cafe and start talking to the person. Not start talking, you communicate and stuff. So anyway, I finished work. This is years ago. This is like more than 10 years ago, right? Close to 10 years ago. And I finished work. I went to the internet cafe to just check my emails and stuff like this, which is what you do. And there's a guy there, standard English guy. You could tell that he's from a gaming background. He's a big gamer, and so he had an internet cafe with some games as well and other stuff. So I knew, I had this feeling from the beginning that he wasn't really a believer. He didn't really have any belief. But anyway, I was quite open with him in our conversations. And so one day, I thought it's a good time to just bring in Islam. So I said to him, "Do you believe in God?" And he turned around and he said, "I believe in science." Right? So his answer was, "I believe in science." When I'm asking him, "Do you believe in God?" It's kind of like me asking you, so Yusuf, like, which part of Seattle do you guys give dawah in? And you reply back by saying, "I don't really like stamp collecting." It's going to be very odd, because I'm asking you something and you're giving me a reply that has nothing to do with the answer. And the real problem here is that he doesn't understand, and most people don't understand, the philosophy of science. What is the philosophy of science? Well, the philosophy of science is to understand what is science, what are the limitations of science, what is the function of science, what is the purpose of science, what is the certainty within scientific conclusions, what can science be used for, what science cannot be used for. So when it comes to the question of God, to try and turn it into a scientific question or to try and replace God by science, it just means that you just don't, you're trying to look up at, the stars using a microscope. You're just using the wrong tool. You're just not going to get anywhere near truth. So that's important when it comes to this, again, this topic of evolution, because we have to start off on the philosophy of science. Now, I think it's very important for the viewers to understand what is philosophy of science, right? So I'd put it this way. I'd put a question to you, Yusuf. Say somebody who studies fiqh, right? He studies, say, Hanafi fiqh or whatever, right?
No.
And then there's somebody who studies the actual usul of the fiqh. Okay? So there's somebody that just learns, picks up a book. Okay, the Hanafi scholars, they say that, this is how you make wudu and so on and so forth. And then you have somebody else who's actually studying the usul. So he's not just looking at the actual fiqh, he's actually looking at the foundations of it. Which of these two individuals is going to be far more informed about the actual law?
The one who's studying it.
Yeah, but would it be the person who just studies the fiqh or the person who studies the usul of the fiqh? Which person would have the bigger picture?
Usul.
Usul, absolutely. Why? Because they're studying the very foundations of the law, not just the law itself, right?
That's right.
Likewise, philosophers of science, they study scientists, they study biologists, they study chemists and physicists. So what we do in our field is we stare at the biologist, we stare at the chemist, we look at, just like the biologist is studying bonobos or chimps or silver apes or whatever, and they're staring at them, right? And they're trying to observe them and they're trying to come up with conclusions. We stare at the scientists and to try and, observe them like they're a species, right? And to see how are they using the tools they have to come to the conclusions they have, right?
Right.
The other thing to keep in mind is just a quick piece of interesting, history here. When we think of someone like Charles Darwin, right? Today, he's referred to as a scientist, right? It'd be pretty, that's pretty obvious to everybody.
Right.
But what if I told you that during his time, he was not called a scientist?
Interesting.
Him and anybody else that was doing science like him, they were not called scientists. They were called natural philosophers. Natural philosophers. Because what actually happened was science branched off from philosophy. So everybody at the beginning, they were just called natural philosophers. And then over time, even like Isaac Newton, natural philosopher. Immanuel Kant, natural philosopher. Actually, not Immanuel Kant, philosopher. But anyway, you get the point. And then it branched off and specialized, right? So science went off into a specialized branch and philosophy continued. But the root of the tree of science is still philosophy, right? Which is why some people are like, forget the science. They even, mock me and challenge me and say, oh, you don't have a background in science. Yeah, but who cares? I have a background in philosophy of science. So it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
It doesn't really matter. So the philosophy of science gives you a bird's eye view. Science themselves, they're just stuck within their domain. They don't see the entire picture. Okay, now let's go over some things. The first thing is philosophy of science, which is a very wide topic, and there's a lot to be said. There's a few things we can take away. The first thing we can take away is that science is not something which should be the main way that you gain knowledge, right? Science should not be the only route of knowledge, right? Because there's many different routes of knowledge which are unscientific, right? Now, when we think of unscientific, when you hear, Yusuf, when you hear unscientific, what does, in our popular culture, what does that mean?
Not factual.
Not factual. Fantastic. Not factual. Absurd, irrational, dumb.
Not truth.
Not true, against reason. Actually, unscientific simply means unscientific. For example, say who was a very popular American president in the, say, 19th century, right? Say Abraham Lincoln or whatever, right?
Sure.
Is it Abraham Lincoln? I don't know who in the 19th century who would have been popular. Anyway, that's not a scientific fact. That's unscientific. Yeah, that's a historical fact.
That's right.
Likewise, Genghis Khan, being the ruler in Central Asia, coming out of Mongolia and doing all the actions he did, or Plato, or Aristotle, or Napoleon, or all of these people and what they did, and all of those things are unscientific, but they're historical facts, right? So we know there's many things which are factual, which are not scientific. So obviously the gentleman I spoke to in the beginning, he was mistaken, because you can't just apply the word science and try and apply it to God and everything, really.
Interesting.
The other thing is, do I need to get one, another one, and now I know that they're two, right? Do I need continuously to do scientific experiments to prove that 1 and 1 equals 2? It's a bit of a tricky question. No.
Yeah.
We know mathematics. We know 1 + 1 is 2 before we do the science.
That's right.
Likewise, all those things we learn in school, a squared plus b squared is c squared, and all of these formulas and all of these geometrical, symbols and all those things, all of that stuff in maths, all of that has nothing to do with observation. Those are just facts, scientific facts. Those are unscientific. They were known before we had modern science. We knew these things. Pythagoras and others, they worked on these things, and people in the Indus Valley civilization as well. So again, we have something else which is unscientific, but we will believe it to be true. All right, let's look at something.
So in other words, what you're saying is that there are other routes to truth, not just science.
Absolutely, absolutely. Science doesn't have a monopoly on knowledge. That's what I'm trying to say. You're exactly right. It doesn't have a monopoly. So think of something else, right? Is it wrong to run over somebody with a car, right? Who's just, like back in the days we had, I'm sure you remember this because I think you're the same age as me, but we had GTA 1. Grand Theft Auto 1. Do you remember playing that game?
I remember, yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember you used to get into the car and now and again it was fun to just run over, like when we were kids, just run over civilians and stuff like that. Yeah?
Right.
That's obviously a video game and it's bird's eye view and it's rubbish graphics and stuff like this. Imagine someone in real life, they just decided to drive a car and start running over people. Right? Would that be evil? Would that be something just evil in real life if someone did that? Absolutely, it'd be evil.
Absolutely, yeah.
But that being evil is unscientific. That's a moral truth. That's something we know through our morals. That's, again, not scientific. Yet what's interesting, Yusuf, is the vast majority of the social movements on Earth, the vast majority of human behavior is led by morality. It's not led by scientific formulas. No one reads, a scientific book and feels, I need to change the world now through, I don't know, something. They read something emotive. They read something about like contemporary issues like the Uyghurs or something like this. That's what really moves people. Even look at movements like feminism and Me Too movement and all these things which are very woke and very, out there. And, masses of people get behind these types of things, Black Lives Matter and all this other stuff. These are all unscientific, but huge hordes of human beings are behind these movements. And this isn't just true today in the world of social media. Historically, the French Revolution, the Algerian Revolution, the Russian Revolution is all about justice and change and all these moral ideas, right?
I've found many atheists who don't believe in objective morals still pushing these moral issues, even though they know that there is no, in their worldview, there is no objective morals, yet they push these ideas. I think that one thing that I wanted to ask, and I see a lot of atheists use this often, is that they conflate two different things to confuse people. And that is the difference between evolution and Darwinian evolution.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Help us understand that. The difference.
That's actually a very good point. That's actually a very good point. So this is, again, another misunderstanding alongside the other misunderstandings that science is the only root of knowledge. So the thing is, evolution as a general idea that you have changes, biological changes which are happening. This is something that was known, theorized about before Darwin, right? This is something completely... Hello?
That's me. You're still good.
Okay. Can you just give me 1 second? I've just got a
Sure.
small thing I'm just trying to fix.
Sure. Take your time. Brothers and sisters, if you have any questions, please do go ahead and let me know whatever questions you have, and I'll forward it to him, inshallah, when we get a good break, inshallah. Brother Stephen, welcome. It's good to see you, Akhi. Mumin, welcome. Allah bless y'all. I do see the questions that you guys asked. Inshallah, I will be answering. I will be passing some of those questions to him, inshallah. Stephen asks, what do you think has influences the science versus religion narrative the most?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Brother Muhsin is coming to crush the stream, and he's saying, first of all, there's so much nur in your face.
It's the lighting.
MashaAllah. Yes. Why you look more like Darwinian every day?
Yeah,
Darwin every day.
So, just to complete your point, Yusuf, so evolution was known before Darwin. It's just a general idea that species change over time. Darwinism is a very particular claim about there being one universal last common ancestor, natural selection being the mechanistic, naturalistic force doing all of this without any other major forces involved. So the major way that it's done is through this mechanistic force. And that's, again, a huge difference between what's publicly known and what's academically understood. So there's that. Now, why philosophy of science is important from another perspective as well is that through the philosophy of science, we understand that science also doesn't give you certainty, right? Science isn't there to give you certainty. So we know that a valid scientific theory, which like Darwinism and other theories in the past, they can change, radically change. You can have huge paradigm shifts. And there's a few reasons for that. Problem of induction being one, which is you can always have new observations which can challenge your previous theory. Another issue is underdetermination, that the same observations can give rise to alternative theories. Number 3 is theory ladenness, that you may have a theory which ladens the way that you look at the observations. Number 4 is to do with problem unconceived alternatives. There may be alternatives out there that you've never conceived of. And 5, methodological naturalism. All your conclusions are limited through the lens of naturalism. That's why philosophy of science teaches that science cannot actually give you truth with a capital T. Yusuf, should we move on? Should we move on? Because I covered the philosophy of science now.
Great.
Should we move on to the science
yes,
part?
please.
Yeah. Okay, good. So, when you are, in school or you watch a documentary, how is Darwinian evolution pushed out? Is it pushed out as a well-established, absolutely undeniable fact? Is that the narrative?
Yes. And not only that, but Akhi, it's also pushed by atheist philosophers who push their bias into their teaching.
Yep, absolutely. So this is the thing which is very important, right? We don't need to have a crash course in biology, but there's three things that, if it's Richard Dawkins or if it's your high school biology teacher, there's 3 things no biologist on earth, no academic, no philosopher of biology, nobody can deny. The first is that Darwinian evolution is based on a probabilistic framework. The second is that there are major assumptions within the theory, and the assumptions have sub-assumptions. Number 3 is that there are still core disputes amongst academics, secular academics, about the main concepts of Darwinism. They're still disputing it to this day. These 3 things are undeniable. So even if the rest of this live stream, you don't really understand like all the biology stuff, or maybe you do because you have a biology background, these 3 things are sufficient to show that yes, it may be a valid theory, but it doesn't mean it's true, and it's definitely not an absolute fact the way that is pushed out by the public. These 3 things hold. It's probabilistic framework, it's based on probabilistic framework, there's assumptions, and there's disputes about its core ideas. And each one of these, inshallah, I'll explain briefly what they mean. Okay, I thought the brother is gonna join us.
No, nobody has requested to join yet.
Oh, I thought you said the brother who's going to crash and join, or you said...
Oh, no. He was just saying something to you in the comments, so I passed that along. Actually, I'll show it here.
All right, Mohsin Mastan, mashallah. Yes, he's a good friend.
Yeah, I actually know him, not personally, but I know that he's a good friend of yours.
Yeah. So when it comes to the first point, probabilistic framework, what does that mean? What that basically means is this: Darwinian evolution is based upon data which is incomplete. Okay, now that's not to say it's a problem, because that's all scientific theories have that. But let's look at the scale of the problem. According to the National Science Foundation, which is based in the US of A, the National Science Foundation, their estimates are that 99.999% of species that have ever existed are extinct. And not only are they extinct, they're unknown, meaning we don't have their fossils, we don't have their DNA, we don't have a shred of evidence for them. So everything that this theory is based upon is using 0.0001% of the data, right? That's available.
Interesting.
Now, that doesn't mean it's not science, because scientists have to stick to naturalistic explanations. So they have to go with the best that they have. But does that really sound as solid as the way that it is in documentaries and Richard Dawkins lectures and these types of things? Of course not. So these are facts that it is based on a probabilistic framework, right? The other thing is that there are assumptions, and there's obvious assumptions in there, such as gradualism, such as homology, such as the idea that mutations are random. And each of these is being challenged regularly, right? Now, apart from the assumptions, there's core disputes about its main ideas. I just want to give you a picture. So in 2016, there was a meeting at the Royal Society in London. Now, I just want to give everybody a little bit of a historical journey here.
Nah.
The Royal Society in London is the oldest scientific society in the world. It's the premier scientific society in the world. And the reason for that is obvious, because at the time that the society was being attended by the likes of Charles Darwin, the British Empire was the global superpower, the pretty much sole world superpower. They controlled the vast majority of the population on Earth. And the Royal Society, based in London, was the main hub of scientific intelligentsia. Now, at the Royal Society in 1858, Darwin came forward and he initially proposed his idea. The following year, he published The Origin of Species. Now, what's very interesting is in 2016, there was another meeting at the Royal Society. And this is 150 or so years after Charles Darwin had published the book. And the subject of the discussion was Darwin right about his main ideas? Meaning over 150 years after we for so long have been told it's a fact, it's undeniable, you're an idiot if you deny it, you're backwards, you're a caveman. The very society where Darwin actually published his ideas in 1858, in 2016, you're having atheist secular academics discussing and debating, and they're not debating about issues around the sort of sides, right? We're talking about the core ideas. They're actually saying, is natural selection able to make body designs? Is it able to make body forms? Does it work? Is the evidence there? And that's the very core of the theory. So in my discussion with Aaron Ra in 2016, and he's a famous atheist YouTuber, I brought this up in my debate with him, and it happened that very year. That December we had the debate, and in the month before was the Royal Society meeting. So it was a really good timing, alhamdulillah. But there's literally no answer to this. There's literally no answer to, if you want to say this theory is undeniable, unquestionable, and you're an idiot if you deny it, fair enough. I'm a caveman. I'm a bearded caveman. Fine, we're Muslims. We're supposed to be backward, whatever, yeah? Well, why are you secular scientists discussing it at the Royal Society? And why are these proceedings, why are they so benign, right? I mean, who talks about them? Unless you're really in tune and you're studying this stuff and you're really in there. Is David Attenborough speaking about this? Is this on BBC News? Is this on Al Jazeera? Is this on CNN? Is this at the forefront? No. What's at the forefront? Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins, who wasn't even invited. He wasn't even there because, frankly, he's not really a scientist. He's not really a practicing scientist. He's more like what E.O. Wilson, I just want to explain here, he's a secular scientist, but he is the founder of a subfield in biology known as sociobiology.
Interesting.
Now, nobody has that. Like Richard Dawkins doesn't have that, right? Richard Dawkins hardly has published any papers. And E.O. Wilson called Richard Dawkins a science journalist. But it's people like Dawkins who we see, publishing and out there on BBC and CNN and discussions. And these people, if I said to you, Yusuf, right? Maybe not you, but somebody else, if I said to them, Eva Jablanka. You'd be like, huh? Who the hell is that? Masato Shinai. I don't know. James Shapiro. I don't know. You say Richard Dawkins? Oh, yeah, I know the guy. Yet these people are far bigger in academia. Far, I mean, there's no comparison, right? There's literally no comparison. And yet they're not household names. And this is why it's so important for us to understand the difference between the public understanding and the academic understanding of this theory. There's worlds of difference. Sorry?
Popularizers.
Huge popularizers. And not only this, I would say propagandists, not just popularizers, because some of their stuff is just total nonsense. I mean, there's no other way to put it. So, when we look at the likes of, say,
let me ask you a question before you jump into that.
Yeah.
There are other theories that are out there that do hold weight. So it's not just the Darwinian theory. Yeah. And I want you to go over some of those and help us understand, their strength in that sense. And also, maybe perhaps for some people who do not understand, some Muslims who do not understand what mechanisms Darwinian evolution uses, so that they understand the difference between evolution and Darwinian evolution.
Yeah. So evolution is generally the observation that there's biological change over time. That's just the observation. Darwinism tries to come up with the mechanism, like you said, and the mechanism is natural selection. So if there are 5 children of a polar bear, right, one of them has a random mutation to have a certain color. That color helps in its hunting and its reproduction and whatever. And therefore, those genes are spread through the polar bear population. That's natural selection. So, say, for example, we hit a new ice age, right? It's extremely cold. The people with the particular skin tones, right, which are well adapted to colder environments, then the environments that, say, the parts of the world that me and you come from, right? We're less likely to survive in those environments, right? So people from the Scandinavian backgrounds, they would be far more likely to survive if there was an increase. So if there's a decrease in the world temperature. So again, that's natural selection. Now, what this idea is that random mutations coupled with natural selections, that's it. That's the main idea. Now, it's kind of underwhelming, right? When you first really understand this, you're like, so you're telling me the billions of species that have ever existed, the sharks, the dinosaurs, the mosquitoes, the blade of grass, the flamingos, all of this is supposed to be random mutations plus natural selection, starting off with like a cell. And where did the cell come from? Well, okay, some say aliens like panspermia promoters like Francis Crick, and others say abiogenesis just happened by itself or whatever. I mean, the first time, Yusuf, right? The first time you actually understand from the horse's mouth, this is what they believe. It's honestly underwhelming. You're seriously sitting there thinking, no, that can't be it. That can't be what they are actually pushing out. Behind all the scientific jargon and technical language and genetics, and that's literally the core idea. The core idea is natural selection, random copying errors, random mutations. That's it.
SubhanAllah.
And it's so incredibly underwhelming. What they do to make it look more complicated is just a bit of sophistry. They're just like, okay, look at this gene, look at this, look at that. But the basic core ideas, that's it. That's basically it. Now, like you said, there are alternatives. Natural evolution by natural genetic engineering.
Before you explain those and break those down, I want to just simplify something real quick for the Muslims that are out there who might be struggling with this idea. When people say to you, how can you not believe in evolution? there's the evidence is overwhelming, and how can you not believe in this? Do we as Muslims not believe in evolution, or do we have problems with Darwinian evolution and the mechanisms that it uses? And I want
Yeah.
you to just to show the difference there.
Yeah. So the thing is, look, evolution is defined in many different ways. The way evolution is generally defined is, especially in the popular context, is there's no difference between evolution and Darwinism. Now,
Right.
evolution is something that Muslims can believe in. It's not an issue. But, biological change over time, part of Allah's design. Class. Darwinism, which is no, it's purely naturalistic. There's no involvement of a deity. It's just random mutations. It doesn't have a goal, doesn't have a purpose. That's obviously something which is different to evolution. It's like saying, some hospital putting out job descriptions for doctors. One guy turns up at the interview, right? And they ask him, okay, so where did you study? Oh, I studied in Harvard Law School. What do you mean? Aren't you a doctor? Yeah, I've got a doctorate in law. No, these are two different things. We're looking for medical doctors, and you're speaking about a doctorate in law, a PhD in law. Again, that's basically a fallacy of equivocation. You've equivocated medical doctor with PhD doctor, right? And those are two different things. Likewise, evolution is different to Darwinian evolution, yet they use synonymously, and that causes a lot of problems, because when you're usually told there's overwhelming evidence for Darwinian evolution, when you ask for evidence, you're actually given evidence of evolution. The problem is the evidence of evolution existed before Darwin, but that wasn't sufficient. And that's why Darwin had to write a book. That's why Darwin had to put forward his ideas. That's why Darwin in chapter 6 actually highlighted how, and that shows Darwin's honesty as well, how his theory is seriously under strain because of some scientific findings, like the Cambrian explosion, which he actually admitted is a serious problem for his theory. His assumption was that it would go away in the future as we have more discovery of fossils. It in fact got worse. The problem of the Cambrian explosion got worse. So yeah, these things are different. Now, briefly going over the other mechanisms, and before I mention them, I think it's important to say that when I do mention them, some people think that means, okay, Muslims can believe in this one and not this one. No. What I'm saying is we can believe in all of them as valid science. It's not true, literally. So natural genetic engineering put forward by James Shapiro. In this, you have directed mutations in a way that cells are intelligent, and other mechanisms like Darwinism are purely naturalistic, and they seem very much like they try and really dumbify what's going on, everything being a lot more simpler than it is. And natural genetic engineering, I would say, it would never really take off as being mainstream, because I think theistically it gives a lot of oomph to the design argument, I believe, right? Hence you can get that from the name. Then you have Lynn Margulis pushing forward the idea of evolution through symbiosis, and symbiotic evolution, acquirance of entire genomes, and she tries to put forward her ideas. Again, it's not going to become mainstream. Darwinism will always be the mainstream because it's so in tune with methodological naturalism, right? It's the only naturalistic, it's the best naturalistic thing out there.
Right.
Then you have Masatoshi Nai with mutation-driven evolution, in which he challenges the standard, way that Darwinists try and explain about these tiny little random mutations which add up over time and then are selected. In fact, Masatoshi Nai is very vocal against Darwinism. He actually calls it. He actually says Darwin's a god. In biology, you can't challenge him. And he calls Darwinism dogma, right? And he believes it should be questioned. Which is the other ones? There are There is another one I've slipped my mind, but
Is there Lamarckian?
Lamarckian, yes, thank you. Lamarckian evolution. So neo-Lamarckian evolution. And yeah, Stephen Rust, welcome. Assalamu alaikum, another good friend. He's right. I mean, Lamarck is somebody that was ridiculed for a long time. However, now we're starting to see the resurgence of neo-Lamarckism. The inheritance of acquired characteristics. Obviously, minus some of the old ideas like vitalism and stuff like this. But anyway, it's really surprising how ideas like Lamarck's were ridiculed and were used as examples to show how bad the science was. And now scientists are going back to Lamarck and they're actually looking at, oh, wow, actually, he had some very interesting ideas. And, humans, we also have certain characteristics which don't really fit that well with the Darwinian paradigm. So something else which isn't really a alternative, it's more of a thorn in the side of the Darwinists, is a niche construction, right? So like right now in the UK, it's cold. I'm pretty sure in Seattle it's cold. We haven't just evolved thicker skins, we're actually wearing clothing, right? We're in warm houses with lighting and heating and stuff. So it's not simply the case that we track the environment and we adapt to the environment. Actually, humans and worms and many species adapt the environment to their needs. So we change the environment to fit us rather than just changing because of the environment. And that niche construction perspective totally challenges head on, directly, goes for the jugular of this idea that, we're just adapting. No, actually, we're adapting the environment to our needs. It's the complete reverse of their line of thinking. So this is actually a good segue into the Darwinism as religion.
Now, before you jump into that, I have a really quick question.
Sure.
And I want to. I'm always trying to simplify things so that people have something to take away from this, inshallah. You mentioned earlier that due to problems like induction, we as Muslims don't have a problem with evolution as a model, and we can work with this as a theory, but because of problems like induction, because science is always changing, which is the beautiful thing about science, and the fact that it could always be replaced, changed, a whole new paradigm can come forward. Because of all of those things, we as Muslims, although we can work with it and there's no issue there, we can do science, we do not have to take that into our creed. Can you explain that?
Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it. So let's look at another historical example. Allah is clear in the Quran that the universe has a beginning. Right? Allah says the universe that He created the universe.
No.
In the beginning of the 20th century, there was a consensus among physicists, and we're talking about many people involved in this, who said the universe is eternal. It always existed, always will exist. In fact, even when Einstein was putting forward his ideas, he also assumed that the universe was eternal, and he accounted for that in his formulation. And again, his theory was very successful. So were the other theories, which allowed, which made the background assumption that the universe is eternal and whatnot. So anyway, what would a Muslim do in, say, 1940, right? Physicists aren't. Physics is the earliest science, right? Medicine, I guess you could say, is the earliest, but still, physics has been really well developed since the time of pretty much the Middle Ages, the time of the not even the Middle Ages, even before that. So we could argue physics has been a sophisticated science, thoroughly investigated and accumulated over time since pretty much the time of Hassan ibn Haytham, right, 1,000 years ago. By the time of the 1940s, we'd discovered the crazy world of quantum mechanics. We had all this amazing stuff going on. And can you imagine the sociological pressure? Muslims are not only backwards politically, militarily, economically, from a scientific perspective, in terms of education. On top of that, everybody in the physics community is saying the universe is eternal. And you people with your ancient book are saying, no, the universe has a beginning. Now, what would a Muslim do in the 1940s? Well, the right thing to do would be to say, well, fair enough, it's a valid scientific theory. We accept it as science, that the universe is eternal. However, we don't accept it in our creed. We don't accept it to be literally true because of the philosophy of science, because things can change. Now, it would have been absurd. It would have been absurd, right? I mean, Darwinism has loads of issues. So, I mean, there's loads of ways. It's easier to push out the philosophy of science narrative because of the problems in Darwinism. It wasn't easy. And if I was alive in the 1920s and I was making the same argument against eternal internal universe, and say you had your Uplift Dawah live stream and I had to come on, this live stream would just be the first 20 minutes. It'd just be the philosophy of science. I wouldn't go into the science because there's no disputes really going on. It's clear from their perspective. The only thing I could say is problem of induction, underdetermination, problem of unconceivable alternatives. I could throw out all the philosophy of science jargon, but I wouldn't have any concrete reasons. Now, 1940s, 50s, 60s, the Big Bang model came forward, and the idea of the eternal universe was challenged. By the way, the Soviets, the communists, and who were much more atheistic than the West, they refused this idea for a long time because it went against their materialistic understanding. And theists, I mean, it's a way, in a way, it's giving theists a boost, right? So the same thing that the Muslim would have done in the 1930s, the Muslims should do in the 2030s, the 2020s, which is science is valid. We accept whatever scientific mechanisms are being discussed and whatever the general consensus is right now, whatever, but we won't accept it within our creed because we don't accept anything to be literally true. And you don't even have to be a Muslim to understand that. You just need to understand the position in the philosophy of science known as instrumentalism. That's enough. That science is a useful instrument, but it doesn't give you truth with a capital T. It's just there to give you an instrumentally valuable theory. That's it. So it's really quite simple.
I've seen you use a really good example, the phlogiston example.
Phlogiston is a good example. There's also the example of quantum mechanics and general relativity. However, I would say let's skip those simply because we only have about 10 minutes left, and I want to cover Darwinism as religion because I think that's super important.
So why is it problematic now for people to question Darwinism? And is that because it has now become a type of deity, a religion?
Yeah. So you see, that's exactly right. Why is it that a particular theory in chemistry can be challenged day and night? No one cares, right? But as soon as you start challenging Darwinism, everyone gets their sort of weapons out and just goes for you. Like, what the heck's going on? It's a very simple thing. Darwinism allowed us to be intellectually satisfied atheists. That's what Richard Dawkins wrote in his 1980s book, The Blind Watchmaker. When somebody says that, and when an entire group of people believe that, you've now entered into a scientific theory an entire emotional investment, right? If you truly are an atheist and you don't want to believe, and you really believe this theory supports your worldview, then of course you're going to fight to the end. You're gonna stick with it regardless of its problems. You're going to push out propaganda. Now, what's interesting is the idea that Darwinism is more than just a valid scientific theory is not new. I mean, Julian Huxley, and recently on my channel, you could see a video I made from a book which was published in 1940s. It's called Religion Without Revelation, right? It's by Julian Huxley. And he calls Darwinism a new religion. And he's an atheist. He's a Darwinist. And, he basically says it's beyond doubt. It's something we have to believe in. And he was the founding president of United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. He was a well-known Darwinist and an atheist philosopher. So he was pushing out these ideas. Michael Roos, another atheist philosopher alive today, published a book with Oxford University a few years ago. And that book was called Darwinism as Religion. And in that book, even though he's a Darwinist, even though he's an atheist, even though he believes Darwinian evolution is a valid scientific theory, he argues from the very beginning, it wasn't just a scientific theory. It was more than that. It was a secular religious perspective, right? So what we need to keep in mind is that Darwin would not have liked his theory to be used in this way because he didn't believe it to be an atheistic theory. Darwin was never an atheist. At best, you could say he was an agnostic in the last couple of years. And for the vast majority of his life, he was a deist. He believed in God. Even when he published his book, he believed in God. He just didn't believe in a personal God. He believed in a God, right? So, I mean, would Darwin have agreed with Richard Dawkins? Absolutely not. Absolutely. Would he like his theory to be used as a religion? Absolutely not. So we really have to keep this in mind, that Darwinism is a serious issue of our times, and it's much more than a scientific theory. And Darwinists hate this. They absolutely hate it when you tell them this. And this is why they get really angry, when you point this out. But what are we really pointing out? I mean, if someone said to me, Islam's a religion, I'd say, so what? Oh, in Islam, you have so-and-so law. I'd be like, yeah, okay, so what? But when you say to Darwinists, yours is a religion, they're like, no, it's not. When you say under Darwinism, Darwin believed black people were closer to chimpanzees, and he believed white people were going to wipe out all of us savages, right? Even Turkish people who look fairly white, according to Darwin, were savages, right? No, he never said that. Okay, according to Darwinism, the oppression of the strong could be explained from a biological perspective. According to Darwinism, patriarchy is natural. No, that's not true. I mean, what the heck? I mean, I'm a Muslim. I believe in La ilaha illallah. I accept all the consequences and the beliefs and the values and the legislations of Islam. And the Darwinists are pure hypocrites. They don't embrace their history. They don't embrace their dark side. They don't embrace their implications. I mean, when you accept and you believe in a worldview, I mean, it's quite respectable when someone stands up for what they believe in. Yeah. So even though obviously I don't believe in Christianity, but when I see these Christians and somebody comes up to them and it says, in the Bible, it says this, and they're like, yeah, I believe that. I mean, some Christians, what they say is, and of course, we as Muslims have no problem with this from a conceptual point of view. They say, well, if God said in the Bible that Jonah was not swallowed by the whale, but Jonah swallowed the whale, right? He actually swallowed an entire whale. They say we would believe it because they're saying, look, ours is a belief system. We believe, right? And we put our trust and our faith in God. And they just are open about their faith, right? And Muslims can be open about their faith and speak about the fitrah and speak about these things. And The Darwinists aren't like that. They want us to believe it's all science. We're refusing. So the ball's in their court. They need to show us it's all science, because from what we can see, there's a lot of religion in this, and there's a lot of religious language, and there's a lot of religious fanaticism with this theory.
I agree wholeheartedly. I remember the popularizer Richard Dawkins once said that if I can get people to believe that evolution is true, then people will automatically become an atheist.
Yeah. And he also said that he believed you can believe in evolution and God.
Mm-hmm.
But since there's an impression that that is not true,
right,
then I can use this impression
that's right
to convince them there's no God. So what he's basically saying is there's a true belief that you can believe in God and evolution. There's a false belief out there that it's not possible. But I am going to use this false belief to lead people to atheism. So I will use their gullibility, I will use their misinformed views to propagate atheism. That is what you call a class A liar. That's what you call a propagandist. And he is so incredibly arrogant that he doesn't even bother to actually hide this. So in his book, obviously in his book, he's trying to convert people, and he makes it clear that, God is against Darwinism, and so Darwinism challenges God and stuff. But in front of an atheist audience with Lawrence Krauss, and there's all these little cheerleaders in front of him, he just spills the beans. Now that one video where he actually admitted this, there's no other place on the internet, there's no other writing, there's nothing you will find a shred of evidence where he's ever said this. I think it's a spur of the moment mistake he made. And that's a mistake which, inshallah, I'm trying to make sure he regrets, because I've been speaking about this for 8 years now. 8 years I've been pushing out this narrative that Richard Dawkins has been lying to people. And the video in which I exposed Dawkins, it's not 8 years, 7 years. The video in which I exposed Dawkins first, when I found this video and I exposed it online, was 2014.
Wow.
Yeah. But still, altogether, through publishing this, if I add up all the views, it's probably 50, 60,000 people who've seen the video, which is pretty pathetic numbers, because his books have sold tens of millions.
That's right.
So it's a sad thing that it's only 50, 60%, 50, 60,000. But look, the people who are honestly looking for the truth, at least inshallah they'll see something like that, and hopefully that will make them see what an absurd idea he's trying to push. And my main thing, Yusuf, is this. Many years ago, I used to sometimes speak about this topic in a lot of depth, and what I realized is all of that is not needed. You just need to show to people clearly they've been lied to, and then they'll stop trusting these Darwinists. And that's all you need to do, rather than get into the nitty-gritty of the science. Because when you get into the nitty-gritty of the science, it looks like they have an argument, we have an argument, and we're having an argument. No, we're not having an argument. I'm simply saying these people are lying. These people are pushing out propaganda, right? And to establish that, it's pretty easy. It's not difficult at all.
That's right. Well, that's great. You took us to where we need to go. Before we stop, I'd like to help people follow your work. I follow your work. I benefit from your work. I've seen a lot of the trainings that you do, and I follow your channel, which is Darwinian Delusions. Subboor Ahmed, Darwinian Delusions, right?
Yeah, I changed it just to my name. Although if you Google Darwinian Delusions, you'll still get it. It was mainly Ali Dawah and Hijab who were really saying, just because what was happening was, although I speak about Darwinian evolution a lot, it's not the only thing I speak about. And secondly, it was very hard to actually, in SEO, search engine optimization, to actually find my channel. So since I changed it, it actually went up by, alhamdulillah, 15,000 subscribers. It almost doubled because it was, yeah, that's the reason I changed it. I didn't want to, because I wanted to stick to Darwinian Delusions, but I eventually had to give it up. But it's still a show, though. That's still the show I do, Darwinian Delusions.
No, that was a beautiful advice, actually, to change it to your name, because everyone knows your name, but not a lot of people know Darwinian Delusions.
Yeah.
So this is perfect. Whenever people search for your name, they can come to the channel and get all of that benefits. So if any of the viewers would love to, or people who see this video in the future, if you want to connect with Brother Subboor, just type in on YouTube, Subboor Ahmed. That's Subboor Ahmed. Inshallah, you will see all of the beneficial content that he produces. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him. It's in the middle of the night for him, and so we don't want to hold him any longer. Barakallahu feek, akhi, jazakallahu khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and put barakah in your time.
And I just wanted to say, you know, Uplift Dawah, mashallah, you guys do some really great work. If there's anybody in Seattle, or maybe you want to start off chapters in different areas, I mean, what I would say is, although we've covered all the evolution stuff, when I first started giving dawah, it was on the street, right? And I still do it, obviously, because of the corona and stuff. However, I'm a big believer in something, and I want your thoughts on this. Yeah,
sure.
Live streams are live streams. You do things live,
right?
Lectures, universities, videos, blogs. I don't think people understand that, and I'm talking about du'at here and Muslims. Fundamentally, the most important way of influencing someone is when you directly interact with them. 80% or more of your communication is not verbal, right? Also, in a world of where we're constantly on our phones, constantly just on our phones, and it's a breath of fresh air when somebody's physically talking to you. And a lot of people in big cities like Seattle and London and Tokyo, they're lonely. And I've honestly seen this, that, you know, when you're talking to people on the street, some people just want to talk because they just don't have any friends. They don't have any family. And, you know, that's why street dawah and the work that, mashallah, you guys do, and, you know, you're always, mashallah, smiling and cheerful in the videos. And it's even the name Uplift Dawah, to uplift you, right?
True.
I really want everybody to understand that, you know, do not neglect the power of this direct interaction. I mean, when the Prophet ﷺ was, you know, giving dawah, when the people came for the festival of shirk, and when he went to, I mean, yes, there was no internet back then. Yes, there was no videos back then. Yes, these things. If the Sahaba were alive today, would they use these technologies? Yes. However, the power of the physical interaction, although the numbers are less, you do a live stream, 1,000 people watch. But you speak to a person one-to-one, the way you change that person's life is not the way you change someone's life if there's 1,000 people who are watching you for a few seconds and they scroll up again. So I really want everybody watching to definitely get involved with Uplift Dawah and other sort of street dawah ventures across the world, because these are the real things which make the difference, inshallah.
Barakallahu feek, jazakallahu khair, akhi. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. And it's true what you said. There's nothing like a face-to-face interaction with people. Yeah. People actually take you way more serious when you're in front of them and you're using their name to communicate with them. It's a whole different ball game. And I hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to continue to do this type of work. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put barakah in your time and bless all of the work that you are doing. And jazakallahu khair for everyone who came to watch today. If you haven't already subscribed, please do subscribe to all of the Uplift Dawah platforms. Make sure you go to Subboor Ahmed's channel. Please do subscribe there as well. And we will continue this. We will do some other work, inshallah. I want to connect with Brother Subboor some other time and do some other streams, inshallah, bidnillahi kareem. Jazakallahu khair for being with us today. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of you. And wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.